Hello, and welcome to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. I'm your host, Robert Bortons. You may not know this, but you can actually go to our website, refiningrhetoric.com, to see the show notes and listen to previous episodes. Today's episode, we have a special guest, a classical conversation student named Elijah, and we'll talk to him about this new game that he wrote, which you can download on your favorite app store, and just hear about how a classical education has impacted him. We'll practice those 15 tools of learning together, and we'll wrap up with our segment on crypto. Let's get started.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
I'm super excited for today's episode. One of the things I love about my job is traveling around to homeschool conferences, conventions, and other events and meeting with and talking with homeschool families and students themselves. It's always fun, humbling, and eye-opening to hear their feedback and perspectives. And in today's episode, my guest is Elijah Whitbeck. And Elijah has been with Classical Conversations for 8 years. And at the time of this episode's release, will be enrolled in a Challenge B program, which is for students at 13 and up. Elijah was born in Texas, but moved to Colorado recently, and he's the oldest of 4 children. And in his spare time, he enjoys reading, mountain biking, playing golf, piano, basketball, gardening, competitive swimming, and computer programming. And recently, Elijah started his own business, PIRUX Games. And so it's great to finally chat with a Classical Conversation student on the podcast. You're the first one. So Elijah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Yeah, want to talk about your interest in computer programming. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you've programmed here in a little bit. But how did you get started with that?
Well, I wanted a game console. All my friends had a video game console and they were playing games, and they were like, well, why don't you have one yet? And so I started begging pretty much my parents for a game console at a younger age, probably around 7 to 8. And so my dad was like, okay, well, if you want one bad enough, I'm going to challenge you to build your own game. And so that was really what started my interest for sure. And I finally did make a game and finally did get a video game console. But even though I had completed the challenge, I didn't stop there. I have enjoyed expanding games and making more.
Well, it sounds like your dad might have talked to my mom, because I was not allowed to have a game console growing up. Computers were just coming out, and when they were coming out, I had to learn to program and do those things if I wanted time playing video games. So sounds like your parents were wise in that. So did you find your classical education background and being in foundations and essentials helpful with learning programming? I know you're just a young student, a young man, but did you feel like you were learning it faster?
Absolutely. Just going through the entire CC experience up to this point, I feel like it has taught me how to learn anything that I want to learn. The grammar stage of the learning model, I read a lot. I read all the books at the library I could get my hands on. Just learning the commands that a computer can understand, memorizing them, and then using them repetitively, and typing in the examples in a book over and over to kind of master the concept that was being expressed. And then I started, asking questions for the dialectic stage. How can I make this work? If I already have something working, how can I make it work better? And lastly, how can I build something useful or never before used? And I learn more about programming almost every day. You learn new methods just by trying stuff out, breaking stuff, seeing what happens to work, and putting it together in a way that makes sense.
Awesome. And so we have listeners who might not be in Classical Conversations. In Challenge A, which you just wrapped up this past year, students have a science fair project. What did you do for your science fair project this past year?
My science fair project was on cybersecurity, specifically password strength and safety. So it was inspired by foreign hackers hacking and shutting down the Colonial Pipeline, which affected the East Coast. You may have seen some of that.
Yes.
Yeah. We were on vacation at the time, and so we weren't able to find gas. And so that kind of was impactful. And so I decided that that was a really cool reason. And I really enjoyed the prospect of venturing into cybersecurity. Anyway, I used a method called brute force. It's a common tool that hackers use to gain access to password protected systems. So I tested a bunch of passwords and found that it was kind of scary how easy it was for someone to locate and insert a password that they had discovered using this method.
Have you hacked your parents' bank account and transferred any money into your own yet?
No, I'm not a bad guy.
You're not a bad guy. That's good. So for the homeschooling families out there, people listening, what were some things that you learned about password strength that they should know about?
Well, definitely. Despite what many people say, my test results said that the best combination for passwords is longer than 8 characters and all capital letters and numbers. So most places will say, oh, you have to have a lowercase letter and a symbol, special symbol, which is like hashtag exclamation point. But I found that those are really easy to crack as compared to numbers and all caps letters.
Yeah, you definitely have to follow whatever rules they give you, but focus on the caps and numbers. I just use one of those services.
Yeah.
It keeps all my stuff. All right. So you're a Challenge B student now, and this past year you've launched your first, or I don't know if it's your first game, but a game and a company. So tell us about the company PIRUX Games and how did that come about?
Well, PIRUX Games was formulated from some of the first games I made for my siblings. I labeled them as by PIRUX. And I chose the name when I was about 8, when most of my beginning games were just me testing out ideas. And they were very simple games, highly pixelated, 2D graphics with very basic workings. But I dreamed of publishing my games to the world. And so what that entailed was that I would need a company. I discovered that pretty early on that if my games were ever to go worldwide, I would need a company to publish the games. And so that was really how PIRUX Games got started, with my desire to create games.
Mm-hmm. How did you come up with the name PIRUX, or what does that mean?
I don't really remember. I was only about 8 at the time. So it really has no special meaning. It just sounds cool. And that's about all I've got.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. An 8-year-old coming up with a business. So did you form like an LLC or start a bank account and all that type of stuff as well?
Well, that stuff just happened within recent history. That didn't happen when I was 8.
Yeah.
But yes, we did set up an LLC and a bank account, and even a website too. So that's come along from its humble beginnings.
Can't really recommend too many video games to parents, or phone games and that type of stuff. But I'm definitely excited to tell people about what you've got going on, and that's called an app called Number Slam, which is available for download on Google Play and the Apple Store. So what is the app, and what was it like building it and releasing it?
Well, the app is merely a digital version of Board Slam, which is a really fun math game that I played in Essentials and every other Essentials kids plays. The game revolves around 3 different grids, right? So there's a 3x3 grid, which has 9 numbers, a 4x4 grid, which has 16, and the 6x6 grid, which Essential students will be most familiar with. That one is designed to be played with practice with the other 2 grids. So the 3x3 and 4x4 are less numbers, so they can practice their mental math without having to spend 10 minutes trying to solve a grid. And then the idea came about when my mom went to an essentials tutor training. And so another tutor mentioned that she wished there was a digital version of the game for her kids to play. And so my mom came home with the idea, and then I decided to try and build it because at the time I was kind of bored and didn't have any projects to do. And then I immediately started jotting down notes and drawing designs for the app. And by the end of the week, I was in almost full scale development, building this idea. And it took nearly a year to build, both for the Apple phones and the Android phones. And it was an incredible process because the app was mostly working by the third month, but it wasn't really great. It didn't really work very well on phones. It only worked best on a computer. And so that wasn't going to work. And I almost abandoned the project just because, well, I'd come this far. It works great. I didn't even imagine that I would ever get it published at that point. But then my dad saw the app. I was demonstrating it to him, and he said, that's really good. But why don't we make it better? And so we, over the course of at least a month, we completely redesigned the app. We kept the functionality the same, but we just made it so much more user-friendly so that we could actually publish it without having to worry about people not even being able to play it. And so I used a programming language called Java, which is for Android phones. And then once I published it, I took only a short break because I soon realized that to build for Apple devices, I had to learn a whole nother language in a whole nother platform. That was going to be a steep learning curve that I had better get started on right away if I wanted to get this in as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's a lot of times people don't understand that the Apple phone and the Android phone is totally different. And so, when we release our apps here, they're like, well, why is this one behind that one? It's like, well, it's totally different. And
yes.
They each have their own challenges. And it's not like you just copy and paste, unfortunately.
Yes, I understand that all too well.
Yeah. I'm an Android guy, and my wife's Apple girl. So, there's always conflict on which one's best.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you have like an algorithm in the background making sure the numbers pop up, or do you got a database that it pulls from? Is there a set number of boards to look at, or is there infinite type of
Yeah. So there are only 3 boards, and each of them is entirely separate. But there is, I like to call it Power Parse. It is NumberSlam's math parser. And so what that means, a computer can't do math very well. People always say that computers are like calculators. Well, they are if someone tells it how. And so I had to build, an algorithm to tell the computer, the phone, but how to do math. Because by default, automatically, the programming language lets you do plus, minus, divide, and subtract, but it doesn't do square roots automatically. It doesn't do powers automatically. And so it doesn't do order of operations automatically. So all those things had to be implemented for this game to be functional, because in the real game, you can use all those things to no extent.
Wow. Well, as always, my guests are always smarter than I am. And Elijah doesn't appear to be any different than the rest of them. So do you think you're going to continue working on this project, or you've got additional projects in the near future that you're thinking about?
Well, NumberSlam is nearing the end of development. We've sorted out everything there is to sort out, really. So I'm kind of looking to move on to a new project, and I'm always looking for new ideas. So if you've got any, pass them my way. I'm considering creating another game that focuses on geography, definitely sparked by Challenge A's cartography strand, where we learn all the countries of the world, the land features, and the capitals. So that is definitely where I'm thinking about going next. It's definitely still in the development stage. I'm still thinking about what it's going to look like. But yeah.
Do you think you're going to continue to code? And if you are, what are some ideas for parents who may want their children to be able to code? Maybe not as good as you, but to understand the languages and how computers work.
Yeah, well, anyone can learn to code. Anyone can learn to code as well as me, even better. There are people who can code way better than me. So I've only come to where I am now with programming because of my passion. And the best advice I could give is to understand your kid's passion. Passion is what makes way for the learning. But as far as resources go, the public library is perhaps the greatest resource you've got. There are a multitude of books that you can read, both for kids and higher level readers. Um, and I've discovered that Scratch is a programming language built by MIT for kids. And it's like the best starting place for beginners, especially if you want to build games like me. Building games was a great interest builder to get into programming. And so once they build skill and confidence with Scratch, they can move on to a more realized software development. Like the second language I worked in was Java, which I would later realize was for Android development. But Python is probably the best for beginners because of its simplicity while achieving more than the programming language called Scratch could. Some people will argue that Java and Python are on par with each other in terms of functionality. So Java is really more complicated than Python in general. Python is kind of angled at new people coming to programming. But yeah, that's definitely the library, books, passion, and that's all you really need.
I love it. I like it a lot. In challenge program, you mentioned the geography, but what are your favorite strands and subjects, and what do you love about them?
Well, some of my fellow students may be flabbergasted by my response, but Latin is by far my favorite strand. I enjoy a good challenge, and Latin provides a good challenge. So, yeah, there is also, think of Latin as a code. There is absolutely a connection between Latin and programming because both of them are like a code, and well, coding is coding. So, and they both make use of roots and stems. So in Latin, you use roots and stems to form words, to form sentences and paragraphs. And then the same with programming. You have to use a root. Think of an example. Say you want to put somebody's name in a string. A string is like a holder for something. So you call it Fred's name, and the value for the string is Fred, right? So that is the root. That is the root of the data. And say you want to extend that data. You want to make it possessive and say Fred's friends and print that out. So then you're adding a stem, which is non-part of the word. It's not part of the variable Fred, but you're adding it onto it to make it make more sense in the current situation. So then you would apply S apostrophe to make it possessive and then say friends. And so that data is acting like a stem and a root. The root of the data is being added onto by the stem.
Well, I do talk to people and they're like, well, why Latin? Why don't we teach computer programming? And one of the things I always tell them is like our chief information officer knows 40 different computer programs. The programming languages change. And they have different ones that do different things. So the best thing you can do is to learn how to learn language. And I think Latin's a great way of doing that. And I think you probably articulated that better than I have. I did know a little bit of programming. I joke now I need someone to install my printer drivers for me. But I did learn HTML a little bit and had designed some websites when I was your age. And actually wrote one of the first websites for a Senate candidate. So
Cool.
when the websites were just coming out. So you got to definitely keep practicing and keep those skills up. Otherwise, you got to hire a whole IT team to help you turn on your computer.
I did hear that you were an industrial engineer at one point in your career.
Yeah.
Did you have to do any programming work in there?
No, I didn't. I actually thought I was going to be a computer engineer, and I interned at a computer engineering company and found out that I really liked engineering, but I did not want to do that computer programming side. So, we had like PLCs and different machines. And so I like knew how to do some basic stuff in those, but no, I did mostly manufacturing and making sure that processes were running very effectively and efficiently, which again is important when you have code, is making sure that it's pulling things the best and most efficient way. So, I don't do any coding right now, but it was something that I enjoyed when I was younger, and sometimes I wish I had, continued to practice and stay on it. But
Yeah, it's a lot like CC. In foundations, you go through. If you start in kindergarten, go through sixth grade, you go through each of the cycles twice, and so you're getting well-rounded, and then you continue to use that throughout challenge. And so it's like you're still practicing what you learned when you were 4, just you're 13, and you definitely have to keep it up. Repetition.
yeah, absolutely. And I loved how you talked about how you learned and just copying from books and learning good code and then writing and breaking it on your own. So those are you're wise past your age, and of course that's what we love to see in classical conversations. And if you're a listener, Elijah is definitely a special student, but there's students, just like him all across the United States. And if, children and families can achieve so much when they are in an environment that really backs them up and shows that, the parents are responsible for the child's education. And of course, who wouldn't want to have wise parents like Elijah's parents who said, yeah, you can get a video game console as soon as you can learn to code. I mean, that's just brilliant. So kudos to them. Just thank you so much for being on the show today. So if listeners want to learn more about you, maybe connect with you online or find out those projects that you're working on, what website can they go to and how can they find the app?
The app is on Google Play and the App Store. You can also contact us through NumberSlam if you have it installed. We also have a website, www.PIRUXGames.com, where you can find some how to play videos for NumberSlam, as well as some news and contact information too.
All right, and that's PIRUX, spelled PIRUX, and the game is NumberSlam, and that's one word, NUMBERSLAM. You can find that on the Apple Play Store or the Android Store, Android Play, Apple Store. I don't. So definitely check those out. Check that out. Support this classical conversation student and family, and give your children an opportunity to just practice those math skills. And I love how you have those 3 different board sizes to just practice at different levels, and you don't necessarily have to start on the hardest level. You can start on the easiest one and just practice math and have some fun at the same time. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Today, everyone, is one of our last episodes where we're going to be practicing the 15 tools of learning together with our recap. Going forward, we'll just be practicing them together with our current event once the year turns. But today we're going to actually practice 3 tools and the 5 common topics of dialectic. And the first tool that we're going to practice and call out is circumstances. And one of the things that I loved his parents did, and I know my parents did similar things growing up, was letting Elijah know that he needed to do some work before he had some fun. And really encouraged him to, program and learn about programming games before starting to play them. The other tool that I'd like to call out is comparison. And I know a lot of people used to say Latin is a dead language. I don't think we hear that as often today. People in classical conversations have changed that over the last 20 years. But he talked about how Latin helped him learn a programming language. And I know that that's so beneficial going forward because being at a program even a little bit is so important in the future. And Latin's a great way to help with that. And Elijah is a great example of how that can work out. And finally, in a relationship, hey, if you're a classical conversation student and you're doing cool things, we'd love to have you on the show. And so you actually can go to our website, refiningrhetoric.com, and you can apply to be on the show if you've got a great story that you'd like to share with our listeners, because we know that CC students are doing awesome things, and it's very encouraging when we're able to share them with our listeners. So now let's practice these 15 tools of learning with our current event. For current events, I'm going to talk to you today about banking, which is vitally important. It's one of the reasons that we have the crypto segment with Will. We want to start thinking about what the future of banking looks like. But this past year, you probably are unaware that TD Bank Group bought First Horizon Bank to expand their reach into the United States. TD Bank is out of Toronto, and they are the bank that seized $1.1 million from peaceful protesters in Canada. And why is this relevant? Well, Classical Conversations currently banks with First Horizon Bank, who they just purchased. And if TD Bank was willing to freeze the assets of those truckers, just imagine what they would be willing to do to a Christian classical organization such as ours, who stands up for freedom, especially religious freedom. So let's talk about the 5 core habits of grammar. One of the ones that we don't talk about a lot is storytelling, using words, specifically written or spoken, to share knowledge. This past year, we saw these truckers who were actually peacefully protesting. There was no violence. There was no injuries. They were singing. They were having a good time. See their bank accounts get frozen, although they had the legal right to be there. Versus we saw protests in the United States where they were called mostly peaceful by the media, where billions of private property was damaged, hundreds of people were injured. I think nearly a dozen people died in these protests. So none of their bank accounts were frozen, but these truckers were frozen. And this bank took part of that. And so with the 5 common topics of dialectic, and we talk about relationship, cause, and effect. And as someone who believes in human rights and believes in religious freedom, when someone that we're doing business with is openly violating those, we try to pick a new vendor. Sometimes you're not always able to do it right away, but it's very important to be conscious about who we do business with. And so the cause of TD Bank freezing these bank accounts is going to affect us, with us removing our money from their bank, which is obviously going to reduce the value of their purchase and reduce their influence here in the United States, because in the United States that values freedom, we would not want to be banking with a group that does not value that same freedom. And finally, in the 5 canons of rhetoric, style, choosing the best way to present the thoughts. So I'm presenting it to you today in this podcast, and I hope you share it with other people. I'm going to write an op-ed on why we're leaving TD Bank and try to get the word out there so people know that the danger that they're in if they're banking with them. And I'm going to continue to tell people through my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and in real life about the dangers of banking with TD Bank and the importance of using our money wisely, because we need to be wise stewards. And it's different than being in the cancel culture. In a cancel culture, you're saying TD Bank doesn't or shouldn't exist. They're welcome to exist, and people who align with their values should use that bank. But for us, we want to use our resources and work with partners and institutions that don't hate us, that don't want us to go under or go bankrupt, but ones that value what we value. And so we're going to do that as much as possible. Yes, we got to do a lot of paperwork. Yes, it's extremely inconvenient. But if we're doing it here at Classical Conversations, I know that you, the listener, can do it at home as well. So really, I'd challenge you to look at the banks that you use and see if their values align with yours. And if not, go find one that does. Hey everyone, I want to interrupt this conversation to tell you a little bit about our all new resource from Classical Conversations, Scribblers at Home, Recipes from Lifelong Learners, an at-home curriculum for homeschool families with children ages 4 to 8, with step-by-step activities and easy-to-follow charts that will help you cultivate a love of learning in your child through intentional everyday play. Find magic in the mundane as your kitchen becomes a classroom, your backyard becomes a laboratory, and your child develops simple learning rhythms that will carry them through life. You can use Scribblers at Home to complement the Foundations program or on its own. Either way, this new curriculum will help homeschool parents of little learners create a family environment where they develop habits like playing, praying, and reading, and those come naturally. This is coming in 2023 in the spring. You can find out more at classicalconversations.com/scribblers-resource. Again, that's classicalconversations.com/scribbler-resource. Now let's get back to the show.
Welcome to another episode of Classical Crypto with Will. We've covered Bitcoin, we've covered Ethereum, we've covered Cardano, we've even touched on XRP. Today I want to talk about Polkadot, which is another prominent crypto that I'd love to give you a bit more information on. Polkadot essentially is a software that seeks to incentivize a global network of computers to operate blockchain, on top of which users can launch and operate their own projects and blockchains. In this way, Polkadot is one of a number of competing layer 1 blockchains aiming to grow the system. Now, the other competitors include, you guessed it, Ethereum, Cosmos, Atom, or Cardano. Unique to Polkadot, though, is that it was launched in 2020, so it is among the newest Layer 1 cryptos, introducing a number of novel technical features towards its ambitious goal. To begin, Polkadot is designed to operate two different types of blockchains: a major network called a relay chain, where transactions are permanent, and a user-created network called parachains. Parachains can be customized for any number of uses and feed the main blockchain so that parachain transactions benefit from the same source of security from the main chain. With this design, the Polkadot team contends transactions are kept very secure and accurate, using only the computing resources required to run the main chain. Users, though, gain the added benefit of being able to customize many parachains for different use cases, different businesses, etc. So that's a kind of a technical version of what's going on with Polkadot. Now let's ask the fundamental question: what makes Polkadot different than Ethereum? Given the fact that they share a high-profile founder, Gavin Wood, we'll cover him in a second here, there is much speculation about what makes Polkadot different from Ethereum. Indeed, Polkadot and the last major update to Ethereum, known as Ethereum 2.0, share many similarities in design and operation. Both networks operate on a main blockchain where transactions are finalized and allow for the creation of many smaller blockchains and projects that leverage these resources. Both technologies also use staking instead of mining as the means of keeping the network in sync. Research is ongoing on how many transactions between the networks could be made interoperable. Parity, for example, has developed technology designed for users who may wish to deploy applications leveraging Ethereum's code and community, but that would run on Polkadot. Very interesting. Lastly, developers can use Polkadot's development framework to simulate a copy of Ethereum's blockchain that could be used for their own custom blockchain designs. Let's talk about the founder real fast. His name is Gavin Wood. He was born in England. He attended the Lancaster Royal Grammar School. He graduated from the University of New York with a master's degree in engineering and a master's degree in computer systems and a software engineering degree. He later completed his PhD in 2005. Before going to work at Ethereum, Gavin Wood was a research scientist working for Microsoft. He was one of the founders of Ethereum blockchain, which he described as the one computer that could run the entire planet. He was co-founders with Vitalik, Charles Hoskinson, Anthony Diamore, and Joseph Lubin during 2013-2014. Wood proposed and helped develop Solidity, which is a huge programming language for writing smart contracts. He also released the paper for defining Ethereum's virtual machine and the runtime system for smart contracts on Ethereum. He served the Ethereum's foundation as chief technical officer for a number of years, but he did leave Ethereum in January of 2016 to start Polkadot. Real fast, let's look at the crypto outlook. Cryptocurrency DOT was launched officially in 2020. According to tradingview.com, it launched around $2.50 per token. Since then, it's been valued as high as $55. Today, in the heart of the bear market, it's sitting around $6. Polkadot is a layer 1 crypto, meaning a lot of projects can be built on top of it. I personally think it'll recover and be just fine and reach all-time highs in the next few years. Of course, that is not financial advice, just my personal opinion.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope Elijah's story was inspiring and encouraging to you. It was to me. Be sure to share this episode with a friend. And be sure to check out our future episodes, which are going to be starting once a week, coming in the new year in 2023. So stay tuned for more episodes of Refining Rhetoric.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation. And visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.